Now on Extended Cut, Madison police shoot and kill 38-year-old Corey Ruiz on the city's Near East Side. 1 week later, we break down our coverage from the days immediately following this shooting, including the outrage and protests from the community.
I'm standing for justice and for Corey and for people my skin tone and my color, because it's important and it matters. It could be me, it could be any of us.
The response from Ruiz's family and their attorney, Ben Crump.
They took my baby from me. I never thought I would have to bury my baby before you buried me.
And where the investigation stands today amid a growing memorial.
What I can promise you is that this department will cooperate fully with DCI and we will not hide from any aspect of this investigation.
Extended Cut starts right now.
#15+ presents Extended Cut, where the story keeps going.
Welcome to Extended Cut. I'm Phoebe Murray with more of what you didn't see on TV. Each week, WMTV's reporters who chase the story bring clips, information, and insight that goes beyond the broadcast. The big conversation this week unfolded from Madison's Near East Side. 1 week ago today, Madison police shot and killed a man they say was resisting arrest and armed with a knife. And we've since learned that man was 38-year-old Corey Ruiz from Madison. I do want to be transparent in saying that there are many aspects of this shooting we are still working to learn. First and foremost, the investigation is underway, being handled by the DOJ and DCI. The investigation will determine whether the shooting was legally justified. All 4 officers involved in this deadly shooting are on administrative leave per department policy. And most people in Madison and now across the country first came to this news from the number of videos circulating that captured the shooting in graphic detail. WMTV has chosen not to show the moment Ruiz is killed. Very rarely do you have an entire newsroom working on one story, but when something like this happens in your community, it's our job to be there, to listen, to ask those hard questions, and be a trusted source for our viewers. So I do now want to bring in a reporter and anchor, Tabitha Bland, who led coverage for us in the field these first 48 hours. Tabitha, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So let's first start with that day. Last Wednesday, you arrive at the intersection of Williamson and Baldwin Street, where this shooting had just taken place. What are you seeing and what are you hearing?
Right, so we got there so early on that the tape was up. There was a bit of a crowd, but at that point it was just witnesses. It was people who had heard what happened. And so we get there, we do know that a bike was involved in this incident. And so the bike was still laying in the ground at that point. Police really hadn't even started processing the scene yet, but there were a lot of witnesses there who immediately came up to us as media, and they were, sharing with us what they saw and had those videos that we did show clips of. They had the raw versions and were showing those to us. And, it's a difficult thing to watch, regardless of where the investigation stands. It's a lot of emotions. People were very upset there that day, and then that really started and
escalating quickly, yeah.
Escalating quickly the next 48
Things happened very quickly, from the Madison police updates to protests gathering on Willie Street, eventually marching then to the square. So walk us through how you were kind of navigating this environment as it was rapidly changing.
Right. I think there was just a lot of trying to be aware of your surroundings, right? And, as media, we want to make sure that we're accurately representing what's happening as it's unfolding. And so, we may have something that we're planning to do for our live hit at 4 or 5 or 6, but moments before something can change. I think that happened. Forgive me, I believe it was the 6 o'clock show, right before all of a sudden the tape came down and the crowd moved forward. And so we started to follow them. For our 9 and 10 o'clock show, I was planning on being live at the Vigil site, our memorial site, and they decided they were going to march to the Capitol. And so we quickly, I was editing from the field, sitting on the curb, right, as we do. So we're in the action, quickly finishing that and then hopping with my photographer, Christian, to continue on that march. And so, yeah, things happen so quickly, but it's so important that we're there.
And we've been showing some of this footage as you were covering the march, and then again, concerts on the square, which was just about to begin. So this was right before 7. What was the scene there? Because people, that brings out hundreds of people outside of the Capitol Square, and then protesters, they came in.
Right. So, I mean, I can tell you the moment that we found out they were doing that. So we're standing there at the vigil site. You know, things were escalating, but they started to plateau a little bit, where I think not as many people were coming in at that point, and so we figured, okay, we're going to be here for a while. And then you start to hear rumblings in the crowd of, we're going to go to concerts on the square. You know, we're going to go tell them, we're going to go shut down concerts on the square. We want to tell them our message. And so, you know, I called the newsroom and I said, hey, I think we're going to concerts on the square. And yeah, that's what you're seeing right now. And so we followed them. We marched up from Williamson Street, up East Washington, all the way up to the Capitol with them. And then they took to the stage at concerts. And there were a lot of families who chose to leave, which, you know, you understand where they're coming from with kids, of course. But then there were a lot of people as well who were standing up in solidarity. And so it was very interesting to see the mixed reaction to something that was so unprecedented.
I also understand it had to be maybe pretty confusing if people weren't on their phones and they're waiting for this music to be playing. So you did see a lot of people checking their phones to kind of see what was happening, but it was crazy how quickly the word did spread.
Right. Well, we had a lot of people coming up to us saying, are you here covering concerts on the square, or are you here covering what's happening right now, and giving people maybe the first information that they had heard about what happened that day. And you know, that's hard because you're getting all the questions, right? And this is what we have confirmed. This is what I saw. This is what I have confirmed at this point from police. And there were a lot of questions and a lot of confusion.
So then you followed protesters into the early mornings Thursday.
Yes.
You had a very long day. Then later that day, Thursday, MPD and city officials, they tried to give another update before they were quickly interrupted by protesters.
And so, Phoebe, I did not cover that event. Our Shayna Najawan was there, but it still showed how high tensions were before the vigil that night.
No, we can shut this down. You can stop talking because we don't want to hear anything you've been saying. When these police officers come down on the street and they decide that they want to take the life of another brown body, there is no oversight for that.
So again, this was a presser that was called by city leaders, and Chief John Patterson was only a few minutes into his press conference last Thursday when protesters took over the room, demanding answers about what comes next.
So when he did have the chance to continue, Phoebe, he said that this is being investigated as a homicide led by the Wisconsin Justice Department. I do want to note that when we were at the protest and vigil site later that day, when that news came to the crowd, people were cheering, and they were very pleased to hear that announcement.
I'm not going to stand here today and render a verdict or an opinion about what the investigation will find, because I believe that will jeopardize what we all want, which is independence.
Chief Patterson said the Department of Justice is investigating this as a homicide, as Tabitha just alluded to, which is the standard process after officer-related deaths. City leaders also said then, you know, any answers about this shooting will come directly from the investigation, not from Madison Police.
And he did also give another update on Saturday, saying he is still in close contact with the DOJ, but he had nothing new to share at this time.
So later on Thursday, a second night of protests and marches continued, as well as a vigil on Willie Street. So you were there watching this press conference, watching people watch the press conference. Where was your head at, and what was that environment like on day 2 of your coverage?
I mean, I just want to back up to the beginning of day 2. So, you know, it started around 10 in the morning, and we didn't get back to the station till around midnight. And so there was a lot that happened during that day. At that point in time, it was very interesting to watch people grieving and to watch people feeling the anger and the frustration, right, at this the vigil site. But also listening in on the press conference, you know, I had it in my ear and was watching the two things unfold at once, as well as other media. But there were other people at the press conference talking about, or I'm sorry, the vigil site talking about the press conference as well. And so, like I had alluded to and mentioned, people were very happy to hear. Of course, it is process and common policy to investigate it as a homicide, but people were very happy to hear that. And so we want to give you a look into the vigil as well, because it was a very powerful scene that day.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at Tabitha's coverage here.
I don't know what to do with this incident. And that's just me just being honest. I'm just at a loss.
Emotions are high and raw here on South Baldwin and Williamson Street.
It's hard. I can't sit up here and just act like everything is okay and I feel good when I don't. It's just unbelievable.
The community hurting, but saying that hurt comes together as one.
It's not just this group of people, that group of people, this organization or that business. It's all just one thing, that we all need to come together and we all need to do better and we all need to step up and make sure that something like this never happens again.
You know, people are recognizing that this is a person, this is our neighbor. This is not somebody that is just a number, not just a name on a list, not just another, entry in the long list of police murders.
The vigil lasting hours, signs, drums, and a large crowd into the night here on this Madison Street.
I think it sends a very strong message that we need to do better. But I want on the other side of this for us all to just be one. Like the great words of the Frankie Beverly, we are one. We one city, we're one community.
Some really powerful words that you were hearing there. I do want to add, we didn't actually see a lot of the vigil, and that's because you were asked to leave.
Right, yeah, that had happened a few times to a few of our different reporters. We've been asked to stay back. We've been told to stay back or even leave the scene. Emotions are very high, and I did just have a conversation 2 days ago, actually, where we started to get a bit of clarity, if you want to touch on that, where, you know, they're telling us that this is a safe space in the middle of the vigil. So it's 2 square blocks that are shut down.
It's massive.
It's massive, yeah. But the middle, where the intersection is where they're asking us to stay out of. We had a conversation, you know, I reminded this is a public street and we can be here. And they said, as you can
Legally,
be here,
yeah, sure.
legally, we're not sure that the response will be welcoming to you if you do continue to enter that space. And so we made a decision to take a step back as they had asked us to, and I'm working with people on the inside right now, trying to understand how we continue our coverage and, you know, show what's going on to our community.
And one other point before that vigil, there was also, city leaders had called a press conference. They had a scheduled listening session that they wanted to hold downtown to be able to hear from community members. It was going to be the mayor, it was going to be the chief, and then the city council president found out that this vigil was happening at the same time, so they moved up, but then that's when MPD had moved up that presser, and that's where we saw those interruptions and that happening, and you watching that from that intersection.
Right, and we watched the people who came to the press conference leave the vigil. They were there first, and they said, you know, we're not going to do anything by just standing here. We need to take action. They need to hear our words, is what they said. And so the group actually split, and some people stayed, more people came to the vigil, but then that group said, we're marching to the city county building. We're marching to the police station. That's where we're going. And they left, and I texted our reporter Shayna, who was there, and I said, hey, heads up. Heads up. I think there's going to be people coming in. And sure enough, she said, thank you so much for the heads up. People are here, and, you know, the press conference is interrupted, and we're going to continue to cover it. And so that's kind of how that whole thing played out that day.
That's wild. We do have the entirety of that press conference, very long, on our website if you'd like to watch it in its entirety. There was some profanity that was being thrown around, and so we didn't air the entirety of it. There are a few spots that words were muted, but if you want to get a better idea of what that sounded like, looked like, we have that on our website as well. But hey, stick with us here on Extended Cut. We're going to dive into more of Tabitha's coverage on the businesses on Willie Street amid the ongoing closure of that intersection. We'll be right back after the short break. Welcome back to Extended Cuts. Continuing to join us is our Tabitha Bland as we discuss her coverage of this deadly Madison police shooting 1 week removed. A big viewer question that we've been getting in our reporting is more of who Ruiz was as a person. So I do briefly want to walk through what led up to this shooting. We know the Madison Police Department says the shooting happened after officers were called to the Marquette neighborhood for a man stealing bicycles and checking car doors. As I mentioned, this is not the first time Ruiz had dealt with law enforcement. Dating back to 2009, we found 40 misdemeanor and felony convictions. He's been charged with serious crimes, including robbery by force, strangulation, and battery of a public safety worker. So fast forward to Friday here, we hear from Corey Ruiz's family speaking out for the first time since Corey was shot and killed. Well-known civil rights attorney Ben Crump is also now in Madison and has been hired to represent the family. So in a press conference that day, Friday, Corey's family called for justice, saying the use of force against Ruiz was not justified. Ruiz's mother and sisters all shared their memories of Ruiz and their horror about how he died. His 13-year-old daughter also asking people to remember Ruiz as a human being.
People, whoever is saying, oh, but he was a criminal. So what? He had a family. He had me. So put yourself in my shoes. What would you do knowing you just turned 13 last month and that you're about to go into a whole new level of school, knowing that your dad is dead?
So Ruiz's lawyer, you see here, Benjamin Crump, is asking the Dane County District Attorney to charge the police involved in this deadly shooting. He also called Ruiz's death a, quote, execution. Now, because of this shooting, as we touched on earlier, the city of Madison says part of Williamson Street will stay closed indefinitely. You can see the closure here from South Dickinson Street to South Fuse Street. Protesters, they set up barricades last week and have shut down roughly 2 blocks between then Willie Street with no end in sight here. So city officials say the closure cannot be permanent and said their sole focus right now is finding out how to move forward. No date or timeline for reopening has been announced. So another angle that I want to touch on with you, Tabitha, here is that you took it upon yourself to go and speak with the businesses who are along this stretch, because Willie Street, it's a very lively place, a lot of small businesses, a lot of places to eat that you would usually see people out and about, a lot of foot traffic, cars coming through. And so for the people who did want to speak with you, you know, what were they saying?
Right. It was a mixture of people, Phoebe. So, you know, we had the people who felt comfortable speaking with us on camera, who you'll hear from in a bit here. But there's also the people who were afraid of what could potentially happen retaliation-wise. That was a bit earlier on. So the first day we were out there on Thursday when the closures and the barricades were first put up. Those are made of pallets and wood, and now there's nails that have been, exposed nails that have been put up at those barricades as well. We talked to the business owner because at first those barricades were trash cans that were taken from local businesses. And, you know, I did ask the organizers, or I guess coordinators of the protest, you know, where did you get these trash cans from? And they say these are community property, so they're ours now. And they took them and used them. But I talked to the business owner who was very upset because, you know, that's part of her business. That's part of her livelihood. And so she was telling me that, you know, July is the slowest month and this is really slowing down traffic to her business. And it's hard for her. And she would prefer to just close if she could, but she can't to make the ends meet. And so that was something that she was struggling with. We also talked with somebody from Baraka, which is a African restaurant, and he came out and said, you know, I want to talk with you about what we're seeing. We get a lot of foot traffic and a lot of people just driving by. Our restaurant's not that big, and so we solely rely on people in the neighborhood, but also people who hear about us and come in. And he's saying that people are really avoiding that area now. Not only is it difficult to park, but there's really no way in and out. There is a fire station there too, which I want to flag, which has brought up a few concerns with community members for response times. I'm working right now with the fire department. I haven't received confirmation of those response times yet, but I did see when I was out there a few fire engines have to take a detour rather than just turning right on a main road. So there's a lot of elements to all of this in terms of impact. Of course, people are grieving and that's impacting them, but it's having quite the impact on businesses and people in the area and residents as well. People live on that street.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at some of your coverage here, Tabitha.
For the last week, we've seen a drastic slowdown in business. Without traffic being able to move normally as it does up and down the road, it's been slow.
A memorial for Corey Ruiz now sits at the center of a 2-block stretch of Williamson Street that protesters have shut down. As the demonstration now approaches a week long, local businesses say they are starting to pay the price.
Talking to people that aren't in this area, they're kind of discouraged about coming to this area.
One person who lives beyond the boundaries, built of wooden pallets and nails, talked with us on the phone. They shared this statement with us saying, quote, "As a resident trapped in the protest zone, I feel the protest turned into a very disrespectful occupation, focusing on punishing Willie Street for the incident. It is now a lawless zone and a homeless encampment barricaded on all 4 sides, with groups blocking local residences and businesses from surviving."
A large number of our homeless neighbors have come in and have been taking up living in this area too.
District 6 Alder Davey Mayer says the city is working on basic services, including a plan to get people their garbage cans back by using city salt trucks as street blockades.
It's a lot of triage to try to maintain safety is the most important thing, life and limb.
He says the group has now implemented self-regulation, setting a curfew for children at 10 p.m. and quiet hours overnight. But he admits he cannot offer a timeline for a resolution.
And I'm sure that's frustrating to many people, but that's just the fact.
And I guess timeline is different than what I'm asking. Is there a point behaviorally that you see in the future where you draw the line in terms of safety?
That's just really hard to answer because it's a hypothetical. I mean, I don't think the city wants to see a permanent takeover of this intersection.
Continue to fight for justice, but allow the small businesses to operate.
Yeah, it's just there's so many angles to this story, any way you slice it. But I do want to start with the Alder there because this is his neighborhood, this is his district, and so, you know, he's being hurled all of these questions as well, and a lot of it is uncertainty.
Right. He told me that he's received, well, this was as of Monday. I can't even imagine now. But as of Monday, he said that he's received over 100 messages from his constituents in his district, and then close to 100 from people outside of his district. And so he's really biting off a big chunk of the questions here. He's, in his, you know, praises, I guess, he has actually put out a blog post pretty consistently, trying to have that communication. You know, I did ask him, hey, have you actually talked to the people who are being impacted? You know, not the people who live a couple blocks down and are maybe driving by, but the people who are inside those barricades. He says that on Saturday, he did go door to door to most of the businesses and homes and try to have that communication. But I have been in touch with a resident who lives inside. We're keeping their name as of right now because of what they've asked us to do for that. But they did share with me that they'd never received communication and they were home. So I'm trying to iron out the details there. But yeah, the Alder, he's receiving a lot of questions right now, specifically just for the people inside of this roughly 2 square blockage. What happens for them? They're trying to get out and go to work, and I've been told by a few people in that area that they were struggling to get their cars out to go to work. There was a bit of resistance happening, and so the mayor, or I'm sorry, Davey Mayer, the Alder, he did just put out a message saying, if there's any resistance with getting your trash cans back, now that we brought the trucks in, text me to this number. And so his constituents do have that now.
Interesting, yeah, because again, a lot of moving parts here, and that is the big question. What's next? This intersection can't stay closed forever, and that's a lot of the questioning that we're bringing to the mayor, Satya Rhodes Conway. And we've been met with resistance on that front, too, because I think a lot of people are just working out what those next steps are. But as far as the actual businesses downtown, the foot traffic, the loss of the cars being able to walk through, how many businesses, from what you were gathering, from what you were seeing, are staying closed or are staying open?
Yeah, so I would say right in the very middle, so at South Baldwin and Williamson Street, on that square, you've got your Crystal Corner Bar, you have a couple of other places. St. Vinny's is right there, Rick's Old Gold, which, you know, if you are a Madison native, you know all these places, of course. But if you are not, just a bit of context, you know, it's kind of a bar scene. There's some retail, there's some, you know, resale stores, things like that on Williamson Street. And so those have been closed, to my understanding, from what I've seen. And as I've checked, those have been closed. Hatch is another store. They have some kind of mixed use, some jewelry, some things like that. They've been closed as well. And then as you start to get a bit further out towards the ends, there are some businesses that have remained open. And the interesting things that I want to touch on the barricades themselves is they're stopping traffic with the first barricade, and then there is a second barricade further down on the street. You may be able to see that in some of the drone footage that we have been maybe showing you here. But a few of the businesses kind of in that in-between, between the first and the second, have stayed open, like Baraka, that restaurant that I spoke with Governor House from, and then also there's a couple of other businesses that have decided to stay open.
I do want to go back to Governor because he had some really interesting sound. It was powerful, and I think he was doing his best to show that he stands with them, but also, you know, it's his livelihood.
Right, and that's a lot of the businesses on this street as well. They have that same sentiment.
And so you brought some extra sound that maybe didn't make that package that we do want to toss to is now here too.
So as a business, like I said, we stand with the family, but we would love for business to continue, you know. It's just a hard spot to be in, you know, because we are with the family, but we also have, you know, overhead at the business and things that, you know, need to happen to run the business and keep the business going. And I just want to tell all the small businesses around the neighborhood, because it's just not only this block, it's just kind of like the whole area is down. Just want to tell them to do what they can to keep the doors open during this tough time.
It was very kind of him to speak with you because we know as reporters you're going to get a no 9 times out of 10.
Well, he actually came up to me.
That's so rare.
Very rare, yep. He said, hey, Tabitha Bland, I know you. You've been out here every day since this happened. My owners of this restaurant and I want to talk to you. If you're willing. And
that
I
speaks
said,
volumes
absolutely,
to your reporting, Tabitha.
Absolutely.
That's so flattering.
Oh, yeah, it was, you know, it's great to hear from the people who are being affected. And I think there's so many people who want their voices to be heard. And so it's important that we do that in that way.
All right, stick with us here on Extended Cut. We're going to wrap up, talk about what is next as we are 1 week removed from this deadly Madison police shooting. We'll be right back. Welcome back here to Extended Cut, and we touched on it a little earlier, but we want to talk about what's next, right? We are 7 days removed from this deadly shooting, and I think that's a question that a lot of people have as far as our staff, our newsroom, and how we are tackling this coverage and continuing to bring how people are feeling about what is happening. I want to go down that avenue a little bit. You had mentioned you were in contact with the fire department. They have a station in this vicinity of the barricade. So what are you looking to forward your story here?
Right, so just for context, Fire Station 3 is directly on the edge of the barricade, and so their in and out is not inside, but to take an immediate right turn, that's how they get to the east side. It's on Williamson Street. It's the straight through. They can't take that anymore because the barricade is directly there on that right turn for them. So they're having to go up and around a block to then go down the east side. And so the idea really came from sitting there waiting for a press conference to be over and watching 2 or 3 fire engines in the course of a few minutes have to take that detour. And so I immediately called a contact at the fire department, and she wasn't available to talk at that moment. And I asked a couple of questions, and I'm waiting for a response on those. But that's something that, you know, I think impacts the greater Madison area. And I want to find out, you know, what do those response times look like, and how are people being impacted? And we do have some reporters also working on, you know, city resources, because as we talked about, the city is using salt trucks. The city is using some of their resources. The alders are getting involved. And so this is no longer just a group that is gathering. The city is using
the lines
their
are
resources.
blurred. Yes. And so even on trash day is Thursday
right
in the neighborhood. And so when they were first using those trash bins,
they were full of trash.
Right, and so even that's been a topic of discussion, but that's why we are continuing to ask the questions. Yesterday, our Ashley Wheel, she was working on a story and trying to get answers from Mayor Satya Rose Conway. She went to her office, they declined an interview. It's not the first time that we have asked for an interview. They said that there is a potential that we will hear from Satya today, so when and if that does happen, of course, we're gonna let you know as soon as that does, but you know, at some point, it is the mayor, it's the city, it's all of these departments functioning together. And so that's, I think, a lot of people's next step question. The other thing I wanted to talk about quickly was body cameras.
That's been a major topic of conversation, especially on social media, for people who don't live here in Madison and know the state.
People really can't wrap their mind around the fact that the Madison Police Department doesn't have body cameras, at least from other contacts, other stations, journalists across the state.
I mean, I've talked with the chief about this. One of my stories I did prior this year was asking what is the main thing that you're focusing on for the capital budget for this upcoming budget.
Chief Patterson, yep.
Chief Patterson, and he said point blank to me, standing in a hallway, say, hey, it's body cameras. It was last year. It is this year. This is what we want, and this is prior to any of this happening.
And so we do want to make clear, though, that the police department, Madison Police Department, has pushed for body cameras for years in the past, and really it's up to the city council to decide that. And so the last time that was on the docket, that was voted down, and then in a press conference we heard Mayor Satya Rose Conway say that her executive budget, which has not been released, she will prioritize funding for body cameras. So we're gonna have to see how that plays out moving forward.
The Office of the Independent Monitor, which is the Police Civilian Oversight Board, I did talk with her as well on the scene of the vigil site, and she agreed, saying, you know, their office is also prioritizing body cameras. So you've got the police department, you've got the mayor, you've got her, but still, you know, we don't have it. And they're saying that the policy behind it is what needs to be.
Is what matters.
Is what matters, yeah.
And then the last piece of this, not the last piece, another piece of this is the investigation itself. We know that Madison Police, again, are not involved in this in any way because it involved a Madison Police officer. And so it is strictly the DOJ's DCI investigation at this point. So that's where we're waiting for our updates from. And you had just mentioned the Office of the Independent Monitor. There are a lot of things that we weren't able to touch on here in this episode because we only have so long with you. But if you do want to watch all of our previous coverage on this deadly shooting, just a week ago, last Wednesday, you can download our free Roku app or watch wherever you stream. A lot of moving parts, and these updates will continue to develop as our work continues here in this newsroom. But we want to thank you for joining us here on Extended Plus. Tabitha, thank you for being here as well. Have a great day.